Alrighty, theoretically, we are now live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Deep Dive live stream. And today we are joined by someone very special. We are joined by Chris Sparks, who is actually my productivity coach. It's not really the word that he likes. He prefers performance coach. Chris, thank you for coming on and welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Great to see you, Ali. Thanks everyone for joining. Really, really excited for this.
Yeah, should be fun. So we're going to be chatting about our favorite topic, which is productivity. And I'm just making sure that the chat is working. Guys, can you hear us in the chat? If you can, give us a hello. Okay, it seems to be working for me. Good stuff. And I need to enable my chat window. Where is my chat window? Where's the chat? Why can't I see the chat? While I figure that out, Chris, for the people who might not know you in the audience, can you give us an intro about who you are and what you do and how we know each other, please?
Ooh, putting me on the spot here. Okay, so yeah, my name's Chris Sparks. Lovely to meet you all. As Ali said, I'm a performance coach. My company, Forcing Function, works with executives, founders, investors to get the most out of the day, achieve their goals most effectively, most efficiently, and I think most importantly, to design a life full of freedom and purpose. My background is in professional poker, plus a bunch of startup entrepreneurial stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into. And yeah, Ali and I have been working together to turn some of these goals he talks about publicly so bravely into actionable steps and habits and systems. And I, hold his feet to the fire and give him feedback, and occasionally can point out a blind spot or two.
Yeah, fantastic. So I've just got lots of questions for you, so we're just gonna dive into it. Firstly, why do you prefer to be called a performance coach rather than a productivity coach?
Well, I think it has something to do with the conversations that need to happen. So my my perception of productivity is that it is very surface level. When people talk about improving their productivity, they're dealing with symptoms rather than root causes. It ends up trying new symptoms or switching one habit for another, versus I'm trying to think about what is the most important thing that I could be doing, and how do I make sure that that happens consistently, regularly, that I make the most out of that time. And so while I think of productivity is doing things, I think performance is my ability to get things done. And particularly on a longer time scale, I find that the interventions for performance tend to last much longer. And so that's really a shift that I have made, where, hey, there are table stakes things as far as, all right, having some routines, things that get you to, plan, do your most important thing of the day. But once those things are in place, relatively consistent, everyone inevitably runs into bottlenecks and roadblocks. And so that's where performance comes in. That's, you've already gone from 0% to 70%, or if you're driving metaphor, you've gone from 0 to 60. And my job is to fine tune that engine to get you to the point that you are making the most of your potential. And let's say someone is already in the top 1% of their field and they want to get to the top 0.001%. Well, that requires completely different paradigms, ways of thinking, behaviors, which without that third party objective reserver to guide, it can be very easy to go off track.
Okay, that's interesting. So it sort of sounds like your definition for performance is similar to just my definition for productivity. That doing the most important things and doing them effectively. But I guess part of the wider conversation around productivity is often around the hacks and the keyboard shortcuts and the macros and things, which are I think, okay, fine, maybe it makes you 2% more productive, but it doesn't move the needle.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think it's much more a cultural perception, right? Everyone has their own definition, and that's why I'm really glad you started off with defining terms. Is I think it's the difference between means and ends,
Mm.
and I think there's way too much focus on means rather than, as you said, what are you trying to accomplish, and what are the ways that you can make sure that those things get accomplished. It's a different, and there's way too much focus in my mind on last mile problems versus hey, what is actually going on. So yeah, it's different definitions for the same thing, but I've found that performance, these visualizations of you have an athlete or you have someone who's at the very top, and what can I take from what's working at that level and apply to myself, is a very different framing than what is wrong with me that I need to fix. And that, I think that leads to more of the hacks, which feel good, feel productive, but don't actually lead towards long-term change.
Nice. Great. So I'm glad we started off by defining the terms, because that's something that I've always been curious about. I wonder if we can kind of dive into your background a bit. So you're a professional poker player. Like what was how what who what what's the story there?
Well, the story, as many, is long and winding, but yeah, I have a little bit of a gaming background. When I was younger, loved playing online games. I was best in the world at a game called Microsoft Ants. I got into card games when I was, I think, like 13, starting with Gin. So Gin's a two player form of Rummy, and I was one of the best players in the world. Achieved a perfect ELO rating in that. And some of my friends from Gin are like, oh, there's this new game called Poker. This is 2002, 2003, when poker was just going online, and you can enter into tournaments for free and they'll give you money if you win them. And that just blew my mind as a 13-year-old, is I can win money playing a game. And that really accelerated once I got to college, where just poker was on every station. It was what you did if you were in university and you were a guy. You wanted to hang out, you were drinking beer with friends playing poker. And so that's where I sharpened my teeth a little bit in these underground campus games. Started playing online a little bit more seriously, first tournaments and then cash games. So by the time that I graduated, I was paying off my tuition by playing poker, essentially, instead of sleeping or occasionally going to class. Which now I can say that, but I wouldn't have admitted that before.
Hmm.
And yeah, I had this job coming out of college with a Ford Motor Company, and this was if you guys remember your history, at least in the States, 2008 was an interesting time to come out of college. I was on this reality show my senior year where I was able to meet the heads of Detroit's team. This is Team Detroit. This is Ford's advertising agency, and got a full-time role there that I was going to be able to help make television commercials, which was my dream since I was like super young. That this is exactly what I want to do. This is all my internships, all the things I did through college was leading towards this path. And I get the call that, hey, the economy's in the tubes. We're on a hiring freeze. We can't bring you on. So I'm sitting in Detroit, Michigan in the winter, no friends, nothing to do. Say, oh, well, why don't I pick up this poker thing that I was doing on the side in college and see if I can make a go at it? And went full time, started teaching other players, started investing in other players. Fast forward 2.5 years of pretty hardcore effort and study. I was one of the top 20 players in the world.
Bloody hell. That sounds like a very small amount of time to become like if I imagine trying to become one of the top 20 tennis players in the world, it would take a lot longer than 2.5 years, right? Like how did you do it so quickly?
Well, it wasn't completely 0 to 60. As I said, I had a lot of games background, which was transferable from a young age. Things like, how do you read an opponent through a screen? How do you discern incomplete information? How do you manage your own psychology? How do you make decisions incredibly rapidly? I mean, the game that I had the most success with as a young age was the early version of StarCraft. So I was used to making macro and micro decisions, operating the metagame, manipulating opponents' perception from a very young age. But I think the real accelerant that happened in this 2.5 years was teaching. I say often that the best way to learn is by teaching. I did over 1,000 coaching sessions with 100 of the best poker players in the world. And I said, I don't exaggerate that. These are players who are just one step below me. And I learned as much from them as they did for me. And it's a big part of why I wanted to work on forcing function, is to get a broad sample size of what really successful people were doing, and to try to cobble together a system that I could use both for myself and for teaching to others. That this process of working with other players, needing to compress the things that I did at a completely instinctual level into a system that others could follow, was really, really powerful in improving the way that I played. And I like to use the metaphor of a cache. You think about a computer caching resources. I made all of these things that were intuitive, very easy to access. It became completely unconscious. And so I could play at one time 30 games at a time and just make really, really, really good, high quality, rapid decisions every half second for 12 hours at a time, because that it was all so accessible to me, because I was just had so many conversations about it. So I think that was the biggest accelerant. I also lived with 4 other really top players for a year and a half in LA, and just lived, ate, slept, breathed poker for that whole time. And so this full immersion and being around other people who are challenging me and growing as well, I think was super critical for that takeoff period.
Damn. Okay. Why did you quit?
Yeah, all of these are really fun stories that I would love to share with you at some point. The Cliff Notes version is, there was a day that we call Black Friday in poker, April 15th, 2011, where the feds shut down online poker in the US.
Oh gosh. Okay.
So it was no longer viable to play online poker in the US. And about 70% of the market was American. So, really hurt the ecosystem overnight. And so I was faced with this, what I saw as inflection point or fork in the road, to put in a Robert Frost term, is do I leave the country, keep playing, make a living out of this, or is this kind of the sign from the universe that I should go and do other things? And, very meandering tale. It wasn't an immediate decision, but I ended up using this opportunity to do a backpacking trip around the world. It was just something that had always been on my bucket list and had never been able to do because the opportunity cost was so high. So I spent a couple years traveling, and through that process, learning a lot about meaning and happiness, and why I was here on this earth. And I was fortunate that a lot of the players who I previously worked with in a coaching context went on to create businesses, and that I was able to have this soft launch into entrepreneurship through having these conversations, getting an idea of what was behind the scenes. And that seemed like the place where the most impact was happening, was people who are putting things into the world. And so after 2 years of traveling, I moved to New York, and I wanted to really immerse myself in the startup ecosystem, both on the operating and investing side. And that led to forcing function. These conversations that were previously, how do we become better poker players, became, how can we become better business owners, better humans? What are the principles and techniques that we can put in place to ensure continuous progress in these areas?
Nice. So the backpacking around the world is been on my bucket list for a while as well, and I was planning to do that this year, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a doctor for 2 years, and then I'm going to take a break, because in medicine in the UK, there's a very natural career sort of break after 2 years of being a doctor, and loads of people travel. But then the whole coronavirus thing happened, so now I'm like, well, traveling around the world is not really a thing anymore. And I had a period where, for like many months, where I was listening to Rolf Potts's podcast and these other sort of traveler type people, and just really getting the bug for travel. This is a very sort of big, broad question, but what was that experience like for you, like traveling around the world for 2 years?
I'm trying to think of a way to encapsulate it. It varied so much from day to day. I look back at that time extremely fondly,
Mm.
and some days were peak experiences in the true form of the world. I mean, I have some stories that today, if I didn't have a few very grainy pre-iPhone pictures, that I wouldn't even believe happened. It's like it feels more like a dream than anything. And I have other days that were super lonely and isolated, and like, what am I doing? It's like, and like the whole spectrum in between. My whole approach to this was, will there be a better time to do this? And my perspective was, it was only going to get harder. This was a rare moment for me where I had no dependencies. There was no job. There was no, steady significant other. There was no constraints. I didn't need to be anywhere at any time. I had just total freedom, and I assumed that that wouldn't be the case forever.
Mm.
And that's a good approach that I have for getting started on projects. Is now the best time to do it, or will there be a better opportunity in the future? So thinking about this context, obviously today is not the best time to do around the world traveling, and it's uncertain whether that full free border will come back. I hope so, because there's really only one way to truly learn about cultures and belief systems and philosophies, which are very different from the ones that we have inherited, and that's to experience them firsthand at the ground floor. So I'm incredibly grateful for all the people that I met, either fellow travelers who I would tag along with or would rope along for my next country, or people who were super gracious enough to host me or to show me some of the best parts of where they lived, and to teach me some of the lessons that I never would have learned via Twitter and the internet, sitting at my desk. That there are just so many different ways of looking at how to live and what makes a good life, that having all of those perspectives, I think that's the biggest thing that I take away, is the appreciation for diversity of experience and opinion.
Okay. So what did that time like look like? Is it like you literally just have a backpack and you're deciding to get a one way flight to, I don't know, somewhere, and then you sort of
Yeah.
freestyle it? Like, yeah, because
Yeah,
I've
let's give an image. So it was a really, really big contrast, and I think a lot of it was crystallized with a bit of a quarter life crisis.
mm,
So just to set the picture, when I was living in the Hollywood Hills, I was splitting a humongous mansion with four other guys. We were hosting parties, doing bottle service all the time. I had my own gym and steam room and pool and hot tub in my room to myself, and just imagine just a 21-year-old with who's never had money and now has more money than he knows what to do with, but is also just like internally a complete nerd and an introvert. And it's like, oh, this I'm just going to try to do what people do when they're rich and partying in Hollywood, and emulate that. And then half of my net worth gets seized by the government, and I don't think I'm ever going to see that again. And the whole future of how I've built a career and a life, and my just whole identity is seized from me in one day, and I'm in total existential crisis and wondering, hey, is this really the right way to find meaning and happiness? And I want to go the complete opposite. And so I sell everything that I own, and I have 5 t-shirts and 2 pairs of shorts and one shoe. So literally just a backpack. And I go from spending way more than I'd like to admit per day to spending $30 a day, living in 12 to 30 bed dorms with complete strangers, and from eating filet mignon and sushi every night to making pasta in the hostel dorm, walking everywhere, taking public transportation. It was a huge shift, and I think part of it was proving to myself sort of the stoicism that you put on the sackcloth, and you ask yourself, is this really what I feared? That, hey, like, no matter what, I will find a way to find meaning and happiness in my life. I don't need all the glamour and the fame and the beautiful women in bottle service, that I could, find this anywhere. So yeah, it was a huge shift for me in terms of lifestyle, and it put a lot of things in perspective for me as far as what I actually valued versus what culture told me that I should value.
Okay. How does that feel, losing 50% of your net worth overnight?
You feel really stupid. You feel really stupid. I think that so many, I talk about this a lot with decision making, is decisions always seem really obvious in hindsight. And if we don't capture our thoughts via a decision journal or even just a regular journal or a conversation with friends, then we might always be kicking ourselves for what we know we should have done.
Mm.
And so with the benefit of hindsight, it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't keep, half of my net worth sitting on a poker site, which is licensed in a shady country that I've never heard of. And perhaps I should have seen the writing, all the writing on the wall, that this was never going to last forever. But all of that is so obvious in hindsight. And so the biggest thing I felt was just total stupidity for being in that situation. The other one was just being completely paralyzed and not knowing what to do, being completely overwhelmed with the options. I mean, there were some players who had their entire net worth on these sites and had to sell their balance for 20 cents on the dollar in order to, because they had, family and kids, they had bills to pay. And I was fortunate I wasn't in that bad of a scenario. I still was doing very well, but it was felt totally blindsided, felt unfair, felt like, oh, it's all over. The sky is falling. What am I going to do next? The super, super silver lining of that is everyone talks about financial bubbles or pandemics or other crises, which, spoiler alert, there's going to be plenty more of those in our lifetime. It's really hard to know how you're going to perform in those situations until you've gone through them. It's really easy when you're reading a book on history, to be like, oh, those guys are so dumb. How did they put themselves in that spot? It was so obvious. But until you've experienced, like, oh, it's a little bit different than I thought. But going through that made me so much more prepared for the pandemic happening. I was able to reorient to reality much faster. And I think that experience taught me a lot about myself and how I can overcome a lot of adversity, but also the need to adjust to these changing conditions. That I was so anchored to this vision of the past, which was so favorable to me, that it was very hard to let that go.
Hmm. Okay. So, did you ever end up getting the money back, or was it just sort of gone into the ether?
Yeah. Yeah. Can I share? I'll share one story today. Man, these are all so good, Ali. I can't wait to tell you these offline.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, 3 years later, again, I was backpacking around the world. This was country number 50. I think, 100 plus cities. I'm sitting on this beach in Koh Phangan, Thailand, where the full moon party is. For those of you guys who've done some backpacking in that part of the world, I was just beach bumming it. I was in this $20 a day bungalow on the beach where I stepped off my bed and my feet were in the sand. It was like, oh, this is just total eat, pray, love bliss. And limited internet, but I walked into one of the hostels that had some internet and I logged on and I saw my bank balance. I'm like, oh my God, the entire amount hit my bank account as a lump sum that I wasn't even expecting. It was like, just imagine like a stork dropping it out of heaven.
Yeah.
And it's 3 years later, I assume I never see this money again. And I did the quick math and it's, oh, with the amount of money that hit my bank account today, I could live on this beach for the rest of my life and never lift a finger for the rest of my life. I'm just completely set. And for the first time in my life, now keep in mind, I've been backpacking for 2 years straight. It's, oh, do I really want to keep doing this? Is this really what life is all about? I wasn't forced to ask that question. I didn't until I had that forcing function of, now you can do it. Like, you are fully capable of just doing this ad infinitum. Is that what you want? And I realized that it wasn't, that there was some meaning and purpose that were lacking, despite all of the happiness that this experience was bringing. So I booked a flight home, and that was the end of the trip. And I find that this is so true, is needing this jolt, this awakening, this revelation of the sense of the possible. Where for me, this was just totally like I was going after enlightenment or a six pack, which for me at least is just something that is completely unachievable. And so like I'm just chasing these cars, and I wouldn't even know what to do if I caught them. And it's
Mm.
like, and for me, the idea of I am just living out of a backpack, doing whatever I want, no constraints, total freedom, was just my idea of winning at life. And for the first time, I'd had that option of doing it and said, oh, maybe that's not what winning is.
Damn. Okay. As an aside, to what extent? So, I imagine a lot of the people that you've worked with, including me, have this idea of financial independence as like a goal at some point. Um, do you think it's useful to have a number in mind for something like that? Because certainly for me, I found that I don't think about a number, but the goalpost keeps on shifting.
The goalpost always keeps on shifting for everything, right? We're all playing an infinite game. We always need another car to chase. I think with financial freedom specifically, it's very important to define what that unlocks.
Hmm.
It's something I've seen a lot of goals in my days. I said the other day, and I really believe this, that I would be willing to bet money that if someone described their goal to me, I could predict with very high accuracy whether that goal was going to be achieved or not, just based on how that goal was defined and the plan that they had of achieving it. And financial freedom is one that I see super, super often. But no one thinks about, okay, let's imagine that I hand you financial freedom, whatever that means to you. What do you do next? Like, what does that unlock for you? What does that change? Do you quit your job? Do you do whatever you want? Do you go and fight poverty, invest in your favorite charity, invest in startups, like travel the world? Like, what do you do with that? And it's so far off and unimaginable for so many people that they haven't really answered that question of like, why do I want? What do I want? How does that? What does that help me? What does that achieve? And so defining what that is, I find, is very important. Is it the security aspect of you don't have to worry that you can? Is it being able to provide for your family? Is it being able to work on projects that are interesting to you rather than just merely lucrative? I find that defining that is really important because sometimes you can find a more direct path towards that goal. I found that when people say they want money, they really want something that they think money can provide them. And that leads to them paying a airport level exchange rate on money to try to get the thing that they really want because they're paying a much larger price versus going that thing directly. Now, to your question, I think people are always surprised that the number is way lower than what they think it is, right? It's like, imagine your ideal lifestyle that, hey, you're able to do everything that you want, you're able to buy everything you want, you're able to start a company, and you add up all those numbers, and the number is usually much smaller than what people think. And it's kind of a useful exercise. It's like, no, I don't actually need millions of dollars to live a life that is comfortable, that I'm satisfied with. But I think the final point that I would make here is, how can you track progress towards a goal that is not well defined? Right. So once it's defined, it allows you to say, hey, am I on the right track towards it? And so in startups, they have this notion of ramen profitability, that if you ensure that the number in your bank balance is going up rather than down, you're on track. That's a very clear metric of whether you're on the path to the goal. And if you can get that right, that I'm saving more than I'm spending, the score eventually takes care of itself. Compounding is a beautiful thing. But no, everyone wants to have these goals. They're so far off that it doesn't really require much change in the present. And I come back to, how can I get myself on that general trajectory now and just have faith in that process, that it will lead me to where I want to go, that I can take my eye off the ball and just make sure that I'm staying consistent with it in the now.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. Yeah, because in my head, I think I've probably mentioned this to you during one of our sessions, but it's like my whole North Star between sort of age 17 and age 26 was, hey, I want to get, quote, financial independence defined as, um, I want to make a full time living from my side hustle such that my day job of being a doctor becomes optional. And, like a year or two ago, I hit that point. And since then, I just haven't really had a sort of North Star to use as like a, why am I actually doing this? Well, I don't know. And for me, the default one has just sort of become, well, I guess it makes more money and it's better to have more money than less money because it's a bigger safety net. And I don't know, how would you go about thinking of an alternative North Star? Do we even need a North Star to live by? Like, how do you think about that?
I think that goals are useful to the extent that they define your next actions. If it's clear what you're doing and what you're going to do next, I don't find that goals are all that powerful or all that necessary. I think where they're extremely powerful and extremely necessary is if it's not clear what you're doing in the short term or what you need to do next. Something else that you touched on, but I'll expand on, is obviously we do things to serve multiple purposes, right? Other than maybe some people on Wall Street, there aren't there aren't a lot of people who do something only to make money. And I said a lot of those people I honestly feel a little bit bad for, because there's a lot that's sacrificed. I said the things that they can think they can get with money in terms of happiness and freedom and meaning that they won't achieve that way. And so I like to think about my values, the things that I'm trying to satisfy with my life, in portfolio terms. That, let's say hypothetically, these three things that I'm trying to find in a mission in a career are, I want something that I can use to support myself and those I love. That's, financial freedom.
Mm.
And I want something that I enjoy, that, I look forward to. It gets me out of bed in the morning. There's some flow there. It's something that, this is cool. I like learning about this. And then finally, okay, it's something that is useful to the world. I can have some impact, that things are better. I'm pushing the human race forward a centimeter or two because I was on this planet. That's like, there's a reason that I'm doing this. There's a mission behind it. Well, sometimes it can be difficult to find that perfect ikigai Venn diagram
Mm.
intersection that has all three of those things in one pursuit. That you don't need to get impact and get rich and do something that you really enjoy all at the same time. That those can come from multiple activities. You can have a portfolio that you combine in order to satisfy all of those. And I think, a lot of my mislaid wandering was thinking that I would find something that I enjoyed as much as poker, but that also added as much value to the world and also made me as rich, right? That thing just doesn't exist. And so I try to think about, how can I create a life where I can satisfy these values, and they don't all need to come from my career. They don't all need to come from my hobbies, all from one place. And in your case, Ali, that's why I hinted this at the end, is I think you might have come at this from, I need to make a certain amount of money in order to justify it. Just the opportunity cost of how lucrative being a doctor can be. That, hey, that this, it needs to cross this certain bar. But in the process of crossing this bar, I assume it, from what you said, that you find this so much more meaningful in terms of having a greater scale,
Mm.
interacting directly with so many people, acting as a teacher and an inspiration to many, that in the process of hitting this goal, you found another thing to propel you forward, which is much more intrinsic. And thus, this whole sense of needing to hit this another milestone sometimes can lead us astray, right? Cause us to do things that are a little bit less in alignment, a little bit less authentic, especially when we're living in public, is so important. It comes across the reasons of doing things. So yeah, it's super nuanced, but I think that this idea of a North Star is really only critical when it comes to deciding a trajectory or a direction. That once you're
Mm.
confident in the path that you're heading, it becomes unnecessary.
Okay. How so? One of in your forcing function book, which I have somewhere here, but not immediately to hand, the one of the opening questions is this idea of imagining your life 25 years from now. Um, I sort of did that exercise, and I found that like a 25-year time horizon was just how do you even begin to imagine a life 25 years later? So like how important is that level of forward thinking in your experience?
Cool. Yeah. First, thanks for the plug. I'm going to do the extremely corny, like holding the book in my hand
Oh,
so
you've got
everyone
it.
knows
Yes,
it's
I
real,
wanted to
it
do that, but
exists,
like
it's a
I don't
thing.
know where it is. It's somewhere
Um,
over there.
yeah, I mean, I spent 6 months. I worked with so many really successful founders and executives. And I was like, how can I get everything out of my head into a format that people can put into practice? And so I spent 6 months creating this workbook, 100 pages, step by step, everything that I do from goal setting, building systems, creating habits, maximizing time and attention, that type of stuff, accelerating learning. This is like everything that I know is compressed into this workbook, and it's free to download. So if anyone wants to drop the link in the chat, forcingfunction.com/workbook, you can go and download it for free. The prompts that you said, where do you want to be in 25 years? And painting that picture, right? Visualizing it. Who are you? It's meant to be incredibly uncomfortable.
Mm.
That's another good question that I like to reflect on is, am what am I willing to be really uncomfortable doing in order to achieve? Most of the time, if you're going after something that's ambitious enough, there's going to be very uncomfortable moments, uncomfortable conversations. And are you willing to bear that discomfort? And the idea of that time horizon, 25 years, is that you remove constraints. That if we have the right habits and systems in place, I believe that we could literally achieve anything we can imagine in that time period. And so removing the I shoulds, the I need tos, is what do you want? Like if you could do anything, what would it be? And painting a picture of that without those constraints in place, I find to be really powerful, both for how that vision is very, very different than the trajectory that you're currently on, or also the ways that it's incredibly similar, that you're already living your dream life. I think those contrasts are really powerful. Work that I really love comes from the guy by the name of Robert Fritz. And his quote is, "It's not what the vision is, it's what the vision does." So, what he means by that is, it doesn't really matter all that much what is in your 25-year vision. What is incredibly important is that you have one, that you have something that you're moving towards. Because what he refers to as creative tension, you have a clear picture of current reality and you have a clear picture of where you want to be in the distant future. And those differences between those two pictures are glaringly obvious. And that generates a creative tension where you are forced to either adjust that vision or to adjust your trajectory to become in line with that vision. That's that intrinsic motivation that propels us forward. And so that's why I love setting just huge goals for myself in the long term, because that's incredibly motivating and it gives me something to head towards. And it also gives me a lot of clarity as well as just confidence in what I'm doing day to day. And we think about how that math breaks down, right? 25 years was 1% of 25 years. That's the next 90 days. And so think about that framing. In this next quarter, I only have to get 1% of the way there. So what can I do that gets me just 1%? It takes something that's a little bit over ambitious, reaching for the stars, and really brings it down to reality. It's just, what's that next 1% step that I can take?
Okay. If you're open to sharing, what are some of your like 25-year time horizon type things that you'd want to have done?
Yeah. So what has come out of this exercise for me is I want to be a teacher. I want to inspire many people around the world to quit their jobs and pursue their dreams. Not that I have anything against jobs, although I do think they're going extinct. It's that I think people wait too long before taking the plunge.
Mm.
And I'm happy to be that person to give them the nudge that, hey, you can do it. You have all the resources that you need. I think that there should be more people who are self defined as entrepreneurs and content creators. They're just putting more things into the world, more of our soul existing in artifact form. I find that that is my mission, to accelerate those people and to teach them what I've learned through pain and toil and lovely conversations like this one. Something else that's come out of it is I want to live a life of adventure. I love doing fun things. I love challenging myself. I love learning. I'm just a totally intellectually promiscuous, and that, like anything under the sun, there's no depth to there's no lack of depth to my curiosity. So I just want to be learning till the very moment that I'm in the grave. Like every day I wake up and I'm a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser than I went to bed. And that last value is the one that came up a lot, was wisdom. I think this comes across in my desire to lead and to teach. But I think that particularly with ancient philosophy, with other cultures whose perspectives can be diminished in a Western focused world, that there is just so much, obviously, scientific findings, that translating those from papers into actionable steps, that there's so much wisdom out there just waiting to be plucked and translated and turned into principles that others can act upon. And I think that all of this wisdom already exists. It already exists within us, even. And I'm very excited about this lifelong process of rediscovering that wisdom and sharing it in a form that I hope takes root in others.
Okay, that sounds like a very well formulated and thought out vision. Like I imagine the process of coming up with that wasn't easy slash comfortable. I imagine it took a lot of soul searching to get to that point where you're like, you know what, this is the thing I want to go for.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting with visions. What's there, but also what's not there. The dog that didn't bark. And that was really cool for me to see, oh, this doesn't involve some of the things that I might have leaned towards in my younger years. So in my younger years, I was very driven by status and fame and having ungodly amounts of wealth. And to notice that those were not requirements to satisfy those visions, that those are just bonuses. Maybe they make the game a little bit easier to play. They're a little bit of a form of cheat code, but they're not essential parts of the journey. So I thought that was pretty cool, because every day we're so just engulfed by everything, by all this noise, everything that others around us are doing. And mimesis is so powerful that we can easily want what others have. And coming back to this vision and what's in it and what's not in it, I find very useful for me to put the blinders on a little bit, to stay in the lane, to trust the process and not worry about what others are doing. I think Naval puts this better than anyone, is that life is a single player game. At the end of the day, I'm the only one who's keeping score. No one else's opinion matters but my own. And I have to play the game in such a way that I'm happy with the way that I played it, irregardless of result. So yeah, I find this really, really important to come back to, because it's so easy to lose sight of.
Okay, cool. Again, just out of kind of curiosity on my end, what does like a standard week look like for you these days? Like, what do you do? I know you do the performance coaching, but like, what other aspects are there of your life?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of separation. I think they were kind of similar in this regard. Is I view my entire life as something that can be repurposed either to share with others or in my favorite pursuits. So I have two full-time jobs and one part-time job. Full-time job we've talked about is executive coach, founder of the Forcing Function. I work with about 10 to 12 executives at a time. Twice a year, we run cohorts of team performance training, which is a small group coaching form. We're kicking that off again in February if anyone is interested. My night job, I kicked poker back off. I don't know if that was clear from the intro. I took 5 years off in retirement and I was lured back in. And so I'm doing that as my nights and weekends type thing. That's probably another 20 hours a week. And then, I've been fortunate to accumulate some capital and deal flow that I do some investing of my own money on the side. That takes up a ton of time, obviously trying to see friends and family, going on adventures when the world cooperates.
Mm.
I love doing, long hikes and bike rides and, jaunts into nature, getting really deep into meditation this year, trying to spend a lot more time there, do yoga every morning. I don't know, things that I just really enjoy that also happen to, put me on a path towards happiness and purpose. I try to make those a part of my life. But
Nice.
yeah, I don't know. It's funny because if I talk about these three things that I'm doing, they've been pretty consistent for the past 5 years, which surprises people who've known me a long time, that the answer, where I lived and what I was doing would change every couple of months. And I was very tied to this identity of someone who's, surprising and, doing crazy things, and kind of settling into that there is really infinite depth within these activities, has been really nice. So even though, hey, like, coaching, investing, poker, these answers remain the same, that every day I discover something new. Poker, for example, I've played 2 million hands over 15 years. You'd think I see it all, but every day that I play, I'm reminded how I just know nothing. I am one of the best players and I'm still completely terrible, because there's just so much to learn there if I'm willing to go deep. And that's why I say that the limiting factor, the bottleneck, is always my curiosity. That if I remember that knowing is the enemy of learning, and put this hat on of I know nothing today, the universe has something to teach me. This next person who I talk to could be a lifelong friend or enemy. I could meet the person of my dreams right now, that this person has like a superpower that's just waiting to be revealed. And if I ask the right question, maybe they'll realize some repressed force within that gets unleashed upon the world. This posture, I find, is just so magical, because you find the lessons in everything.
Okay. So, why why did you decide to go back into poker?
Yeah. The the short story was, I had a client who was a real estate investor in Hong Kong, and being a Mandarin speaker, he had gotten access to games in the Chinese market. And being the annoying and loving friend that he was, he kept sending me screenshots of his results. And I was pretty early on in forcing function. I was getting a lot of meaning out of it, but it certainly wasn't having the success that I am today. And it's like, oh wow, those numbers are kind of tempting. Maybe I should hop on there and give it a look. If nothing else, I bet I can give him some pointers on how he can be making more. And so I got lured into playing these Chinese sites. Obviously, China was a huge, booming, emerging market. So while US, UK, other Western nations were pretty mature, it was like traveling back in time 5 years, only I know everything that I knew now. So,
Mm.
Despite taking 5 years off of a game, which it's really hard to exaggerate this, gets so much harder every year, where I think just to maintain my standing, I need to be twice as good,
Mm.
to hop into this new ecosystem that was, instead of moving forward in time, I was moving back in time, that I just hopped back in with 5 years not playing and immediately started winning. It was difficult not to continue that. I think there was also a little bit of shame about my poker background. Poker is a pretty zero-sum game. A lot of my values shifted quite a bit with my travel and my forays into the startup world. And a lot of my friends who used to be only poker friends, now I didn't have any poker friends, and no one actually knew that I played poker. It wasn't something that I talked about. I kept it to myself. I wanted to fully envelop this identity of someone who's post poker, and realizing not only that it's pretty cool that, to have this level of success, it's something that so many people have tried to do, and that so much of my life view and philosophy comes from the game. So many of the very helpful ways that I have of viewing the world come through my experience in poker, that it was something that normally it was okay to talk about, but also okay to pursue as part of my values portfolio,
Hmm.
as we were talking about before, that with poker, and said crossing my fingers it could shut down in every day and like shut down tomorrow, as I've experienced. As it stands today, because I'm still able to play high stakes poker and win, more money than I need, it allows me to only do what I want to do, only work with what I want to work, do things that are incredibly impactful and meaningful. Because I've solved for this financial part of my life, I can put a lot more of my energy and my time into things that aren't revenue generating. So I find that it's a nice kind of balance for the portfolio. It's
Okay.
also just a form of productive procrastination, in that if I find myself having a hard time creating content, then I go play poker. Or if I'm not feeling the desire to play poker, maybe I'll work on my business. That I have that other option that I can justify.
Okay. Okay, just out of just like pure curiosity here, like let's say I were a top 100 poker player in the world. How much money are we talking in terms of when you say high stakes poker? Like I have no like number in my mind of like of even a ballpark of what this looks like.
Uh, the best players are making upwards of seven figures a year. I never quite reached that mark, but in my peak months, I was making $1,000 an hour.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's
And
not bad.
and is that like a sort of playing one game at a time, or is that like having like 18 monitors around you playing 30 different games at once? Like what does it look like to be a professional poker player these days?
The latter is a little bit more Minority Report, with all the screens. So yeah, I wrote a post on this that I actually just published yesterday, that if anyone wants to check out, called Play to Win, on my website, where, just to put it into context, if you're playing as you see it on a movie or in a casino, you get 20 to 25 hands per hour. But because I'm able to play multiple games online from the
Mm,
comfort of my bedroom right here, that I can get 1,000 hands per hour. That each game I get 80 to 100 hands per hour multiplied across 8 to 12 tables. And so you're talking about I'm getting 50 times more hands per hour. And so I can earn 1/50th as much as I am in person in casino and make the same amount. Obviously, I make a little bit more. And so that's the value of playing online. But the learning value is that I'm making 1,000 decisions every hour. And immediately after, I'm told by whether they call or fold the cards my opponents show to me, whether my assumptions were correct. That those assumptions are immediately tested and revealed back to me. So
mm,
the feedback loops are incredibly tight. So even within the context of a session, much less over the course of a year, I'm improving these micro parts of my game all the time. And I think that that's really key. That our The speed of our growth is proportional to the tightness of our feedback loops.
mm.
How often and how accurately we're getting feedback on what we're doing. And so, yeah, when I'm sitting playing poker, it's lots of clicking. And so the higher the stakes I played, if I'm playing, what they call nosebleed stakes, that it's so high that your nose bleed, maybe I'm only playing a couple games because I really need to pay attention in
Okay.
these games. If I'm playing at lower stakes, then I can be a little bit more autopilot because I know all the players so well. I know all my best practices so well. I can just load up my giant screen with games and click away. And there's so much that I don't know until I sit down. I think Woody Allen puts this better than anyone, is like 90% of success is showing up. I have some days it's very, very slow. I play for a few minutes, I'm not feeling it, or there's not many games going. I hop off, I go spend time with my partner, go outside, do things that are fun, recharge. Other days it's like buckle up, like this is going to get wild. There's these people who are spending lots of money, lots of games going, and I might play for 12 or 16 hours straight, not leaving my chair, just clicking. And it's really hard to know, before I sit down, which one of those days is going to be.
Wow. Is that fun?
I love it. I love it. It's funny is I didn't have an appreciation for it until I tried to make it in the real world. It's
Nice.
like, oh, like this is such a grind. Man, just like sitting in my chair and clicking a button. This is so boring. I think when in my younger years, I didn't have that sense of curiosity that I do now. And now that I realize how hard most things are, that they don't feel like playing a video game like online poker does.
Mm.
I really enjoy it. I said I continually find it challenging. I'm always learning, and that it said that there's no comparison for immediately having some skin in the game, putting some money at stake, making a decision before your time runs out, and immediately figuring out whether you're right or wrong. I don't think there's anything else that compares to that rush.
Okay, that's very interesting. So when you're playing these games, do you see the webcam faces of other people, or is it purely like how do you tell when someone is bluffing and stuff like that? Is that even a thing?
This is one of my favorite questions, and this is where I get super woo, because what most people talk about in terms of intuition, right?
Mm.
So talking about serendipity or manifestation, all these types of things, it's really just an accumulation of internalized experience. And so, having played millions of hands, I see signal where other people see noise. So there are all I see is just a person's screen name. That's all I know about them. I'm able to take notes on past behavior, but all I have to go off of is how fast they click, the numbers that they type in, and past patterns. And I think it's my kind of savant ability is pattern recognition. It comes into play when I'm working with clients as well, as I assume that we are, deterministic pattern following creatures, that free will is just a complete illusion.
Mm.
And that if we put ourselves in the same context, we're going to repeat the same patterns. That if I see someone following a pattern, it's like, oh, this has happened before. What happened last time? I'm usually able to disrupt that pattern and help put them on a better course. In the context of poker, something that just might seem completely meaningless for me has a lot of meaning because I've played so many hands and I've seen the situation so many times before. And so even though there's a screen in between us, there's still another person on the other side of the screen. And with this intuition, I'm able to actually tell, like I could, it's very hard to put into words in the real moment, but I can feel them. I can feel their current emotional state. I can sense them. And a lot of that sense is, what are they trying to get me to do? And how do I do the opposite? How do I wildly disappoint them? And so that's why I said it feels so woo, is I can't see them. I don't have anything other than just like how fast they're clicking and the number they're typing in, but I can feel that person. And that's really what poker comes down to is that sense.
Mm. Okay, that sounds really cool. Um, okay, so we've talked about why poker. Why investing?
Well, it's high leverage.
Mm.
I, the two things that I do for a living are essentially, selling time. That I can only make money while I'm sitting down in the chair.
Mm.
And as you reach a certain level of financial success, it becomes much better to increase the percentage you're making on your current capital rather than accumulate more capital.
Mm.
So it's first just a constraint. But also, I find that it is a really, really deep area of learning that just due to cultural financial incentives that most of the smart people that I know, I say many of the smart people that I know do something in the world of finance and investing. And so these conversations I find it really, really interesting and fascinating on their own merits. There's lots of exploration of complex systems as far as like the stock market or the economy and how all these pieces interplay and how complex behavior emerges in the form of prices and valuations and all this fun stuff. And I said there's a similar sense of feedback in that you are making decisions, and even if there's a reflexive, postmodern nature to people place a high value on things like Tesla because other people place a high value
Yep.
on things like Tesla. You're getting immediate feedback on your decision making. So I love placing bets. I think all of life, even perception, is a bet. And so investing for me is just another form of having skin in the game of what I believe and getting whether those beliefs are in line with reality or not.
Okay. So would you call yourself an angel investor in startups? Like, what's the terminology that this would be?
Primarily, I invest in other investors. All this stuff gets very meta. In investing terms, I would be an LP. So, say an angel investor invests directly in
Mm,
companies. I invest in those angels who find the companies.
okay.
Um, I think that my I think that I said one of my critical skills as an investor is people. I think I'm pretty good at picking horses. A lot of my coaching is I'm picking horses that I'm giving a little bit of nudge to people who I think are going to go on to incredible things, no matter whether we work together or not. Maybe I give them a little bit of boost. Is that I'm betting on people, and I think this form of investing is it's way higher leverage for me to find the people who have these unique product insights, who already
Mm,
have this network in place, rather than needing to go out and build it
okay.
myself. So yeah, that's the idea. Is I'm trying to invest in people rather than companies.
Okay, cool. So if someone like Naval is an angel investor, he would have a bunch of LPs who are feeding him cash, hypothetically, and then he would go out and actually have the conversations with startups and decide, okay, I'm going to invest in Notion, for example.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, the investing thing is something I've recently become interested in because, like, you know, it's it's like the Robert Kiyosaki the final quadrant is where your money makes you money as opposed to your time making you money or the products you're creating making you money. And I've been toying with the idea of I wonder if it's possible slash doable slash reasonable to invest in other creators. And I know a lot of people are now starting to think in those ways. I'm thinking, if I've got friends who want to start YouTube, can I invest, let's say, 10 grand for like 10% of their business, whatever that might look like, give them a boost up, do some collabs with them, give them the advice and coaching they need, and just sort of, it would just kind of be fun. And it would be an interesting way to leverage my capital, but also my expertise and the fact that, like, when you have an audience, you can then use that to boost the value of the things that you invest in.
Yeah. At first I think it's a great experiment. I think good investing comes from proprietary deal flow. So building up an audience, being a value add investor, and that hey, you are going to accelerate someone's process of reaching a certain level,
Hmm.
right? Show them where the holes are in the ground, help them to get a good kind of flywheel in place, maybe give them a boost using your own audience. These are ways that you can have proprietary deal flow. This is an area that I don't have a ton of firsthand knowledge about, but I do think that ISAs, income share agreements, are going to become increasingly prominent as we think about, not only here in the Western world, but in emerging markets where you have incredibly smart and well-educated people who don't have access to the same resources or opportunities or haven't been dealt as good of a hand. That if you can remove some of these barriers to entry, these people can go on to some pretty wonderful things. My personal experience in the poker realm was finding players who I thought had a lot of talent. I talked to them and their thought process was really dialed in. It was clear this is someone who's going to work hard and they think about things in the right way. But either due to constraints or as far as they had, high lifestyle expenses, family otherwise, or they were still very early in their career and didn't have much capital, that it was going to take them a while to work their way up the ladder. And so I was able, by completely covering their downside, I put up all of their capital and working with them directly. It's like, hey, download my brain. Here's everything I've learned about poker. This way, what might take you 3 years can take you 3 months. It was is able to create a very win-win approach, and that they were able to really accelerate that journey and still have some of the upside along the way. And for me, I was able to make some money while I sleep, and by teaching was improving my own game.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was. I think setting up those win-wins was really critical. How it wouldn't have worked was like, let's imagine that I wasn't a good poker player. Well, then I wouldn't have had any value to add, right? And that at that point, money is a commodity. And so I think that as we are seeing right now, that every audience is becoming a brand, is becoming an investment platform. You see lots of people raising funds, building businesses that are sprouted out of having a dedicated audience that is very domain specific. Like riches are in the niches, so to say, that if you build a really high quality dedicated audience, like the sky's the limit on what you can do with that. And I think that it's so great what you're doing as far as, guide not guru, as you put it, sharing the behind the scenes, demystifying some of this stuff, that it's really not that hard, not all that scary, and that it really just comes down to a good process that allows for consistency. So hey, I'm all for it.
Nice. um, Again, totally selfish question coming up, but like, how do you? So once you've sorted out your economic engine on the poker front, or hypothetically, if you're a YouTuber, how do you then think about continuing to charge for things like services and courses and coaching and things like that? This is something I've been thinking a lot about, and I wonder what your take on that is.
As far as when you don't need to charge, how do you think about continuing to
Yes,
charge?
exactly. Yeah.
Well, I can only talk from personal experience. I like to think about this as a barbell approach where I completely open source everything that I know and give it away.
Mm.
So the workbook, everything that I talk about, all the content that I share is literally the best stuff that I know. I hold nothing back and I give it all away. So like anyone can access it for free. The same things that I talk about with my clients. But the limiting factor is I can only work with so many people at a time. And so I need some form of filter or cover charge to just, optimize for that constrained resource. And so I have like the most majority of people, and I help people all the time via email and social media. Like my DMs are always open. Like I'm always happy to give advice and feedback to anyone, especially if they're like trying to put these things into practice. I've helped like hundreds of people who've done exercises in the workbook for free, just, because I really enjoy it. But as far as working one-on-one, there's a huge energetic exchange there. And so that's priced at a point that most people won't be able to afford just by the nature of it. And but the people who can are generally working on pretty big things. And so there's a lot of ripples created by giving a small acceleration to these people because they generally have some scale in what they're doing. And so that's what I think of in terms of the barbell is I either completely give everything away or I charge a large amount for it. But I think for me, the nice thing is that I don't have to work with anyone. There's lots, and I turn down more people than I take on.
Mm.
That I think that's the cool part about operating from a position of abundance is that it's a hell yes or no. You don't need to do anything. I always tell someone is like, if you are not like absolutely thrilled with the value that we're delivering you, like full refund, like immediate, no questions asked. Like it should be a complete no brainer, 10x ROI, or else like, go talk to someone else. Like, there's plenty of people in line. So yeah, I also do think it's hard to overestimate investment. Investment comes in many forms. Could be monetary, could be time, could be energy. That, for better or worse, we value something that we've invested in. And so if there is no investment, there's generally no buy-in, there's generally no change. So, having something at stake usually is a good precursor to putting things into action.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like as I was saying to you during our calls, I've been toying with the idea of doing some one-on-one coaching, but the thing that's been stopping me from doing it is I think I'm probably thinking about it in the wrong way, in that I'm thinking about it as, okay, what do I have to charge for this to be worth my while? And that number is too high for me to put out publicly because it would just look really bad, and I would feel very uncomfortable charging that amount. And I think of opportunity cost, like, okay, in that hour I could be doing a 1 hour coaching call. I could instead have planned out an online course which would have like a 20x return on that time, or things like that. But then I did a sort of free coaching session for one of my YouTuber friends yesterday evening, and it was really fun. And I was like, damn, this is something I would actually do for free because it's fun, and if it's the right sort of person who's taking the advice nicely and it seems to be helping them, then I feel good because I feel like I've added value to them. They feel good because they're getting value out of it. And I've been working with this other guy. Do you know Sean McCabe? Okay, so he does a lot of like content stuff. So he's been helping out on coaching systems, processes, that sort of thing. And he was the way he was saying it is that, well, you don't, the way he approaches one-on-one coaching, it's that it's more to build the relationship with the individual because they're a cool person that it's kind of fun to work with, as opposed to because his time is worth $X hundred an hour.
Yeah,
Is that how you think about it as well?
I completely agree with Sean. I think most of the benefits are intangible. For me, in an hourly basis, it just doesn't make any sense at all. But I do it because I love it, because it propels me forward, because I learn an incredible amount, because I build really deep and meaningful relationships with people who I admire and respect that I hope will last a lifetime, and because I think it's my small way of giving something back of what I've learned. That just there's no substitute for like a one-on-one connection and the level of impact and acceleration that can happen there from that relationship. And I love it. It gives me a lot of meaning. It gives me a lot of purpose. It gives me energy. I find that that's a very good filter for whether to work for someone is, do I feel energized or drained after the conversation? And yeah, I come back to what I said before is I think we fall into the trap of trying to satisfy all of the parts of the portfolio from the same experience, that we can get different values from different places.
How did you first get started with the coaching thing? Like, or how does one get started with it? Like, and I'm asking because
Yeah.
if I want to get started with it, like, I feel like if I were to just post on Twitter and put out a Google form, it would get inundated with stuff, and then I'll be like, oh my god, I'm drowning in. How yeah how would you go about it?
Yeah, I think you, I think you have a very different problem than I had. Was I think if I would have said something, it would have been total crickets, and that caused me to delay on making the plunge
Hmm.
for an embarrassingly long time because I was afraid of what people would think, or most afraid of, hey, what if I put myself out there and nothing happens, that I shout into the void. And the only thing that got me over this hurdle of do I try this thing that I keep coming back to, was someone asked to pay me. I mean, I just can't help myself. I love to teach. I annoy my friends all the time because I just try to help everyone, and like I can't help. I learn something, I can't help but share it. Hopefully they put up with it, enjoy it most of the time. But yeah, I was having these conversations all the time just for free, is just like, hey, these are just the conversations that I have. These are the interactions that I want to have. How can we help each other? How can we accelerate each other towards doing something with our lives? And yeah, one of my friends is like, hey, I bet I would be much more likely to put this into action if I paid you. Can I pay you? And I'm like, oh wow, like this actually is like a thing.
Yeah.
So I like spent a half hour putting together a Google Doc of like, oh, here's what you get with coaching, and we talk this much and it costs this much. And for the first 6 months, I didn't even have a website. It was just like, oh, like send me a Venmo. It was like so super informal. But yeah, it really just came from someone asking, and me said like, oh, this is actually a way to make money, that I do something that I would do for free. Okay, cool. And that just led to referrals, led to creating a website and a brand and some content, and it's kind of slowly but surely compounded from there. I think in your position, if the fear is being inundated, is maybe you think, hey, who are the like five content creators, as this is totally off the top of my head,
Hmm.
that I would love to work with, people who I already have an existing relationship with. I find what they're doing important, inspiring. I think they're on the right path. I like the way that they think. I enjoy our conversations. and say, hey, would you be interested in working together? Here's what I was thinking. I would go from that approach. As I've been fortunate enough to have more inbound coming in, I try to be a little bit more outbound oriented in terms of who would I like to work with and how can I build a relationship with them.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, anytime I even think about like coaching, I always just get hit with the imposter syndrome that, what if it's what if I just suck at coaching? What if they don't get any value out of it? And what if like dot dot dot? And do you ever feel that way? How do you get over that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not. I suck. I'm very comfortable sucking. But the thing is, I don't need to be great because it is just already so valuable to have someone who's invested in you give you a objective third party perspective
Hmm.
on what you're doing to allow you to step outside of the day to day, view things from a little bit more of a 10,000-foot view and dissect them and figure out what's going on, what's holding you back, what can you do to accelerate what you're doing, what can you do to support what you're doing. That I don't need to be an expert or to like be trained in the latest coaching techniques. I think all this certification stuff across the board is complete BS. I just need to be able to be present, to be curious, and ask really annoying questions and then shut up while they think about it and try to come up with an answer. That's really all that coaching is. And it's not, there's no magic to it. Now I'm lucky that, hey, doing this 500 times, I mean, I've had 500 coaching conversations over the past few years. I start to get better about the questions that I ask and when to talk and when to shut up. And, the patterns that emerge where people keep tripping over themselves or the things that seem to generalize in terms of habits systems. I start to develop that intuition and that feel. But from day one, what I was doing was already really invaluable and useful because it's so rare that people shift from this first person to third person perspective in their lives that any forcing function to create the space to do so is already valuable in itself.
Hmm. Yeah, I often think that about the value of coaching. Like I've got I was counting the list. I have like teachers slash coaches for about like 14 different things now. And I often feel that like even if they just didn't say anything, the fact that I'm showing up for an hour to talk through something is itself ROI positive. And therefore, like the coach just has to occasionally ask the odd annoying question, and then occasionally also give some directive advice. And it's like, damn, this is totally worth it. And it's been so much of a no brainer that anyone who's messaged me being like, hey, you talk about this coaching thing, is it good? And I'm like, hell yeah, hell yes. And most coaches also have like money back guarantees. So like if you feel like they don't get the you just get your money back. Um,
Yeah, can I
yeah,
comment on that?
of
I
course.
think it's like anything. So therapists, nutritionists, personal trainers, acting coaches, speaking coaches, like there are people who can help you accelerate with everything. But where there is no barriers to entry, right? Where someone can just self-define, unfortunately, most people aren't going to be that good or aren't going to be a fit for you. Everyone has their own set of experiences and biases and specialties. And so don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like I always recommend before you decide to work with someone, I said, whatever area of your life you want to accelerate, try multiple people, like just like get a broad sampling and see who you have resonance with, see
Mm,
where there's a fit, because that's the most essential thing. I said coach is just like a brand. I have people in my life who I think of more as like a counsel, is like if there's anything in my life that's important to me, I want someone to help illuminate my blind spots and accelerate my progress there. And I've spent a lifetime and will spend a lifetime cultivating relationships with those people in my life so that we can have that type of relationship together that we help accelerate each other, whether it's formalized or not, but that it really comes down to the willingness to experiment and to try on to see whether there's a fit.
okay, nice. We've got another 10 minutes, so just sort of changing direction completely. There was so much productivity stuff I wanted to, performance stuff I wanted to talk to you about, but we just kind of got into the weeds of the other conversations in a great way. So ages ago, I wrote down the word values because you said that you feel like you want to be living in a way that aligns with your values. And the question I had was, how do you go about trying to figure out what your values actually are?
Good question. And man, I can't believe 10 minutes left. It's a sign of a good conversation. It flies by. And it reminds me of I did a presentation on flow. I was in my psychology of creativity class in college. And the teacher at the end says, like, what a great encapsulation of flow that you give an entire presentation on it without saying the word flow. And so what an awesome encapsulation of what productivity is, and that we haven't talked about productivity. I think that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
man.
So values. First, my lead in is, I think whenever we are stuck on a difficult situation, in a difficult decision, difficult question, that really it is, what do we optimize for in terms of values? What do we most value? What value is most important right now? So it's like, where do you want to live next? What career do you want to pursue? What do you want to major in? It all comes back to, which value do you value the most? Because everything is a series of trade-offs. You give up something of something that you want in order to get something that you want a little bit more, or to get a little bit more of something that you want the same. That everything is giving up some to get some of something that you want a little bit more. And so that's why it's so critical to decide what you value. An exercise that I really love, that I recommend, is you can find these lists of values all over the internet. So I don't even need to bother to recommend one. They're all out there. And so what you do is you go through these lists. Maybe there's 100 different values in there, and you circle 10. It's like, here are the 10 things that I value the most. And then you say, all right, now cross a line through those 5. Okay, now you have the 5 that you value most. And this becomes a little bit harder, is like, oh, do I value freedom or security? Or do I value relationships or personal growth more? And that's where you have to reconcile these trade-offs, that I have to, when it's close between these two things that I supposedly value infinitely, I'm going to have to pick one. And so which one do I pick now? And you see where this is going. I cross off one. Now it's my top 4 values. Then it's my top 3. Then it's my top 2. Then it's my top 1. And so if you decide what is most important to you, and so for me, in order, the last time that I did this, keeping in mind that these values shift all the time, and that's what a good review process allows for, is that your goals, your priorities, your values are going to shift. My top were personal growth, defined as, like, am I achieving my full potential? It was adventure, as in, am I doing fun and challenging things as a baseline way of being, that just my default state is out of the comfort zone. And then the third is wisdom. Am I tapping into a deeper sense of why we're here and how we can live better lives with meaning? And so if I come to a decision point, and said many decision points are invisible, a lot of success is realizing that you have the ability to course correct at any time. It always comes down to, well, which value am I optimizing for here? Which value is most important? And so it's like doing that hard internal work ahead of time that makes all of these future decisions so much easier.
Okay. Yeah, so I've tried these sort of value list thingies a few times. So for me, often, like, freedom slash autonomy comes like the highest in the list, and I wonder if that was similar for you at one point or another, and now it's shifted to the personal growth thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's certainly shifted. I think I valued freedom autonomy the most when I didn't have any, or at
Yeah.
least I was perceiving that I didn't have any.
Yeah.
The grass is always greener. I shared the story of, when I was in Thailand earlier, where, wow, I've achieved ultimate freedom and autonomy, and maybe it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. That it wasn't all it cracked out to be. And we talk about meaning a lot. I'm super excited for your book. The most influential article I've read all time is from Roy Baumeister. It's about the difference between happiness and meaning. So this article is a summary of his wonderful research. Hopefully we can link that in the show notes. But the idea that happiness and fulfillment sometimes overlap, but are sometimes at odds. And things like freedom and autonomy are very highly correlated with happiness, but are very uncorrelated with purpose.
Hmm.
And so I realized that for me, purpose was more important than happiness. And that means that I was going to need to give up some of my freedom and autonomy willingly in order to achieve a little bit more purpose. But that this isn't always the case. You see some people who super burn out because they over optimize on the purpose side of the spectrum. And these are the people who I have to force to take some time off, go to the beach, don't bring your phone, tap into that life is beautiful and sunsets are fun to watch and birds are magical creatures, right? Like sometimes you need to go the other side because we over optimize on one side. Maybe you need a little bit more autonomy and freedom. That's why I said allowing for these values to shift.
Hmm.
But in terms of my compass, I know, and this is a part of like the company name is forcing function, that if I give myself too much freedom and autonomy, I'm going to play small. I'm going to hold back. I'm not going to take as many chances. I'm going to be a little bit too perfectionistic, be a little bit too comfortable. That I need to be pushing myself and reducing my freedom in order to do things that I find meaningful. That I'm willing to sacrifice this thing that I value in order to get something that I value more.
Okay. Yeah, I think. Yeah, thank you for the Baumeister recommendation, by the way. I bought his book Meanings of Life, which is his like huge ass sort of 1991 textbook about all of this stuff, and I was so excited to find it because it like I couldn't find the ebook anywhere. It's not on Kindle, and I've never seen anyone in a self-help book like reference it. So I'm like, damn, this is this is a gold mine. And so I've been reading through his stuff a lot and thinking about these big questions. And I feel like for me, this difference between purpose and happiness, or meaning and happiness, is one area that I am still quote struggling with, because I feel like I don't really have a purpose that I'm living my life by. Hence the question about like a North Star. I have like, these things that this portfolio ikigai type things of, these are the things I enjoy and these are the things that have an impact. And I know I want to be a teacher of some sort, but it doesn't feel like a nice, like a well-crafted sort of mission statement, as it were. And life is like very happy. Like I absolutely love my life, but just before we were on this live stream, I'm doing this course at the moment called Ultra Speaking, to improve public speaking, and I was having as part of that there was a one-on-one coaching call with the coaches, and one of the speeches that I did sort of, it's like they give you a speech title and you just kind of impromptu just make stuff up on the spot and then change your intonation and various exercises. One of the questions was, what's missing? And I was like thinking about this and I was like, I feel like what's missing in my life is a sense of purpose. Because I feel like I'm now at the point where I've over optimized for happiness and no friction in anything, and I can order takeaway whenever the hell I want because the ROI in my time is not worth cooking, and that sort of thing. Do you have any thoughts on that sort of jumble that I just throw at you?
Well, I mean, due to quality, it's hard for me to say exactly what you're experiencing, but reading between the lines, I wonder if there is a mistaken sense of what a sense of purpose feels like, that there's some sort of magic switch and lights become a little bit brighter and everything just changes. And I don't know. I think something that I have noticed is that it's not this it's not this constant inside of me that I feel purposeful. Is like I have moments of clarity around it, surrounded by large pockets of self-doubt and confusion. And I try to focus more on the former. It reminds me, I was very fortunate to have a conversation with a monk on my travels in Japan, and we were all able to ask a question. It was a small group of us for this event at a monastery, And my question, which was translated to him, was, what does it feel like to be a monk? Just like your purpose is so clear. You wake up and you go to your cave and meditate. There's no question of what you do. And he said, I think that would be the thing that most surprises you, is how confused I am and how much I doubt the path that I'm on. That what appears to be complete clarity is really just a mask. And I think that's so true of everyone. Is everyone just kind of blindly stumbling around, and occasionally, we put our hands on the cave wall and like, oh, okay, this is the general direction that I'm heading. Or, oh, wow, what's this feeling right now? Maybe this is meaning. That was pretty cool. I'm glad I did that. It was super hard, but yeah, I'm really happy that I did it. I don't know. I might just be I said I might just be spitballing here, but if there's anyone who I've seen who's kind of living in alignment with the purpose, I would say it's you. And maybe it's just reconciling that maybe that feeling isn't all that you thought it would be.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yes, this is something we should definitely explore on our next offline call that we have, because when you were describing your purpose thing, I got a sense of, damn, you live every moment as if you're in perfect clarity with this vision, and I was like, oh shit, I don't have one of those.
No, no, I really hope that's not what comes across. I am no Superman. I struggle with this all the time, every day. I have bad days. I procrastinate. I doubt what I'm doing, just like anyone else. And it's just a constant practice to try to come back to what I'm doing, what I'm trying to achieve, why I'm here, and hopefully to reduce this gap between, oh no, what am I doing, to, okay, yeah, that's right, that's what I was doing. To try to reduce that as much as I can, to like just bring myself back to that purpose. But yeah, I mean, I wander and stray just as much as everyone.
Oh, fantastic. That is very reassuring to hear. And I think that's a great place to end this conversation. Chris, thank you very much for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to plug slash share slash any final ask of the audience while we're here?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, first, thank you so much, Ali. This was so fun. Thanks you guys for tuning in. I like to say this. I think this is just the beginning of a conversation. So if something I said today resonated, would love to hear from you. I'm pretty easy to find. Twitter handle at Sparks or Marks. Email chris@forcingfunction.com. Would love to hear any questions, anything that you disagree with, anything that you found resonant. Two things that I would point you to. First, if you liked some of these principles that we talked about today, my workbook, Experiment Without Limits, that I held up so annoyingly before, is available for free. You can download that at forcingfunction.com/workbook. And because of the timing of this, we're super excited to offer team performance training again. So we're gathering 15 executives. So these are founders, investors, high level CEO level people in companies, to work together to accelerate their growth. So this could be multiplying output, putting out projects faster, accelerating learning speed, this type of stuff. I'm going to teach everything that I know, and then it's going to be a mastermind type format where we help each other illuminate blind spots, hold each other accountable. So if you're interested in that, you can learn more at teamperformancetraining.com. Applications open next Wednesday, January 26th. That's all for today. Yeah, thank you so much, Ali. This was a true pleasure.
Good stuff. Oh, and we're chatting. Are we chatting tomorrow or the day after on your podcast?
We are live tomorrow, so that's a good thing to plug. If
Oh yeah.
you haven't got annoyed by our voices and points of view yet, Ali has been gracious enough to come on my conversation series Lunch Hour. So we are going live tomorrow at, that's 12 Eastern, which I believe is 6 CST. Is that right, Ali?
I've got it down as 4:45 to 6:15.
Oh, oh, I guess you on 15 minutes earlier because I know you have a hard time with video and audio quality, right? I got to make sure you got your
Nice.
stuff together. All right, so 5 p.m. CST. Ali's coming on Lunch Hour, and our theme is learning in public. How, if you are sharing your work, if you are giving people a look behind the scenes on what you are doing, what you're learning, day in the life type stuff, this will accelerate your growth. So Ali and I are going to be sharing some examples from our personal life that hopefully you can put into practice. If you're interested in joining us, you can register for free at luma/lunchhour11. So lu.ma/lunchhour11. Hope to see some of you guys there.
lu.ma/lunch hour11. Okay, I've just put it in the chat. In theory, it should be clickable. All right, Chris, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. And I will see you tomorrow at lunch hour. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
See you
And we'll see
tomorrow.
you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.